So I'm here with Bob, and Bob's going to show us around the Australian Opal Centre Heritage Shed. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, in the 70s, there was up to 25 feet of dirt on the surface that had been dug up by the old timers by windlass. It hadn't been processed and it was still had a fair amount of good opal in it. So a lot of these machines here were early ways of treating that dirt.
Right.
This little gadget here, if you come around here, it's got a puddling basket on the back, and the nifty thing here is that it was driven around the fields, and when they got to where there was dirt to process, they disconnect the tail shaft from the diff and attach it onto the drive for this gadget, and then run the motor. This thing would turn around, they'd shovel dirt into it and then pull it out by hand. And even though it looks fairly primitive, in those days it was easy money. We worked top dirt in the 70s and it was the easiest opal mining, and you'd go out and you'd shovel a load onto a truck and take it to a puddler and put it through the puddler and come back with $1,000. It was good.
So when was the last time that something like that would have been used out here?
This was really 60s, and it progressed from that to puddlers. Puddlers are the same sort of principle but much bigger, sitting on top of a water source. So you pump water, and this is dry puddling, and wet puddling then morphed into agitator, where you've got a cement barrel running around and conveyor belt and fairly sophisticated stuff. The diggers were, this is the first digger that was made by Knut Nexo, and it's a little bit primitive, but it's still very effective. Once you've worked one of these things, it's very hard to go back onto a jackhammer. And the newer ones have hydraulic rams on the side and a little bit more sophisticated, but still capable of pulling out a hell of a lot of dirt. If you come over here, this is an automatic hoist. This particular design was the first design. It was made by a fellow called Eric Catterall, who lived about a kilometre up there, and Eric was a polio sufferer. He used to mine, but he had almost no use in his legs. He used to climb up the ladders just with his hands, and he found it very difficult to get people to work with him because he was slow. He lived in a little camp that was mud built, and he was called the Wombat because he was on a wheelchair. The entrance was only about so high. And if you look at it here, it's this particular design is called a diff hoist because it's got this car diff there. And the advantage of the diff is that it gives that selective rotation. You put the brake on this drum and this one spins, and then so your bucket comes up, it goes over, it trips there, and it comes down again, and it's magic.
So not a limited slip differential, obviously, a non-limited slip diff.
Yes.
Yep. And it looks like a great example of Aussie ingenuity.
Yeah, the disadvantage is that it made the hoist large and bulky and heavy, and so at a particular time this was replaced by running gear, a series of pulleys and a hydraulic reservoir and stuff. But it still it worked, and a lot of opal came out with those.
So have you used something like this?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Too many times by the sound of that, Bob.
Yeah. I mean, the hoist, one hoist we had, this system wasn't working very well. So we'd start off the morning and we'd pour a litre of sump oil onto the brake shoes. And so the bucket would tip, and then it'd go screaming down the hole. And as we put the load on and put 70 buckets or whatever up, the dust from the tipping would get into the brakes. And so at one point it'd have a very nice steady come down, and towards the end of the load it'd be a bit slow. So it was this progression of free fall to a controlled fall by the dust on the in the oil. I mean, it was primitive, you've got to say.
But again, that was the ingenuity, coming up with solutions with the limited tools you had.
Yeah, it was. One time we backed the truck into one of these hoists, and the whole thing crumpled up. And so we backed the truck up to it, tipped the truck, tied it on, and then took the hoist down to Canute, who made these diggers. Very clever man. And Canute came out of his workshop wearing he's Danish, wearing his clogs. And he looked at it and he pulled his long beard and he said, "Wait here." And he went and he came back with two things, a 14-pound hammer and a great bit of maybe 6x4, about 2.5 metres long. And he gave the bit of timber to my mate Eric, and he took it over and he put it in the hoist in a particular way, and he said, "Push." And he looked at the hoist and he picked up the hammer and he went around and he gave the hammer two almighty whacks at a particular point, and the hoist just sprang back into shape. I thought, this man is a genius. I just couldn't see how he could perceive that was the right thing to do. Fabulous. There's a little bicycle over there.
Oh yeah, so look at that.
And the bicycle was owned by a Yugoslav lady who used to she had a camp on the 3 Mile, and she was totally paranoid. And every so often something had happened, and she'd demolish the camp and she'd move it sheet by sheet from one location to another and reassemble it. And I remember one hot day stopping and asking if I could help, and I got this incredible torrent of abuse, so I took off. And she had a sad end.
So we've got another diff here.
Okay, this is another one of those early machines. It's the basket is more robustly built, and so it's operating from a stationary motor there. The other thing they used to use, haven't got one, is a York hoist, where the diff is attached to a pulley and a rope going down the hole, and so you'd use the motor to pull it up, and then somebody would swing the arm around, and they were quite common for a while actually before the automatic hoists came in, and then of course blowers, and then big hoists, super hoists. Yeah, the work.
So these are some of the things on display now in the Heritage Shed.
Yeah.
But obviously the plans are well advanced for the Australian Opal Centre, $20 million first stage of the Australian Opal Centre.
Yes, that's true.
So how far down the track before we'll see that?
Possibly 2 years, 2 or 3 years.
Next tour to OROC, we'll be able to come and see that maybe.
Construction should be starting next year.
Okay, excellent.
There's a project manager just been appointed. And yeah, no, it's about to happen.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting doing the excavation, because a lot of dirt's got to come out of that hole, and there's a lot of opal that might be there still.
Well, that might be good. That might pay for stage 2.
It might. I worked a couple of claims just on the corner, and they were very fossily. They had all sorts of stuff in it.
So presumably the Australian Opal Centre, once it's finished, will have more of what we've seen here, but a lot more, obviously.
If you go around the open cut, there's a fenced-off area where all sorts of old machines have been collected, old trucks and all sorts of stuff here. So this is just a little taste of the craziness that was going on. These posters behind sort of document that there's a group of people who are interested in mining technology and the evolution of mining technology, and they came out and did a project on it, and they were pretty fascinated with the stuff actually, because there's been a lot of ingenuity in the place, and because because the motivation is financial as well as anything else, there's a great reason to get it right, because the people who have got it right have made a lot of money, and as each sort of wave of technology has come through, the people that have sort of surfed the edge of that wave have really made it.
So, yeah, thanks for your time, Bob. Fascinating, and I look forward to seeing the Australian Opal Centre in its full glory.
It will be in its full glory. It'll be a really interesting building, actually.
That's good. It's been great to have the Toyota Tour de OROC here tonight as well. The committee's done a fantastic job of laying out some food, and I think you're all
It was a good night.
fully fed there. Thanks, mate.